Oh, man. Did you really have an interesting night, or?
Interesting is not the right word. Annoying, long. Definitely not interesting.
Okay. I mean, I could classify that as my night. So that's a very vague description. You don't seem too happy, though. All right, good morning. We are back. Yes, the one-game slate that everybody's been waiting for because nobody knows what's going to happen with Trae Young. We pretty much know what's going to happen with Giannis. It's Game 6 in Atlanta, and it's myself, Adam Scherer in the house, and we're going to break everything we possibly can down and have some fun, answer your questions. Super Chat, Premium Slack, everything is up and running. At Ship My Money DFS for Adam, at Shander Show for me, Chris producing, and No House Advantage providing everything here, sponsoring the show. So we have a lot to tell you about what we're doing on Awesemo, but first and foremost, what we're doing today is trying to take advantage or maybe get ahead of some scenarios depending on where we are with the Trae Young injury. Adam, my man, good morning. It's been, 12 hours, it feels like, maybe a little longer, 18 hours since we last spoke. So seems like you had an interesting night, you said. And again, I can classify it for me as well, but I'm home with a baby, so maybe there's a different means to the same end. What's up, man?
Yeah, short night, not a lot of sleep. Didn't catch up on any eye sniper, so can't talk about that yet. But
Okay.
yeah, 10 a.m. Saturday show, my favorite show of the week.
Coffee. What, do you have the slushy going? Like, what do you have? What's the go-to drink this morning?
I got water this morning. I didn't wake up in time to go get a slushy.
Oh, man, it must have been a night, man. If you're rolling with water and you didn't have time to get the super blue slushy, then you must have had something going down.
Yeah, didn't have time to go to 7-Eleven.
Nothing at all. All right, man, no problem. You're here, though. You're smiling. You don't look banged up. Here's how I know you're in good shape, is the hat is up, the brim is up high enough to where I can see the eyebrows and also like the lines right here. If it's like super low, I mean, if we get this Adam, then it's like, oh man, all right, let's just try to make it as easy as possible for him.
Yeah, not feeling too bad, just tired.
Fair enough, man.
Yeah, not that much alcohol, just not a lot of sleep, so just a weird night.
That's the worst, isn't it? Where it's like, I would have rather pounded a bunch of booze in order to feel like this. I mean, if I knew I was going to feel shitty and not get any sleep, then I would have rather had the alcohol on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. If I knew I was going to feel like shit for the show, I would have just gone harder last night and at least made it worth it.
Now, I didn't get any sleep, but I can't complain because the other human being that's an adult in my house got even less sleep. So it's like, I feel like shit. I've been pissed and defecated on. I've slept maybe like 3 hours, but my wife, it's been like 10 times worse. So you're really the only person I can complain to today. That's it. That's like my small little 20-second complaint, I promise.
Yeah, you definitely had rougher than me, it sounds like.
No. It's again, different means to the same end, which is like, hey, it's 10 a.m. Let's roll. Coffee, slushy, water, whatever it is, your drink of choice, man. This series itself has been, as we've seen with Atlanta, I think, just difficult at times where when Milwaukee has won games, it's been, I think, predictable, whereas Atlanta has done ways and continues to kind of shock people. And either from a betting or heavy DFS standpoint, looking at really where the Hawks have been all the way back to New York, now through here, Game 6, hosting this game. It's kind of crazy, I think, to be in a spot where we're still up in the air about the two stars, but the Hawks really, I don't think, have convinced a lot of people, at least, that they're NBA Finals bound. Are you believing in Atlanta individually and maybe in this series?
No. I think Trae Young has been really, really impressive this postseason. He's definitely made me more of a believer. Like I already thought he was really good, but he's made me more of a believer. But obviously with them dealing with his injury, now they're down, they need to win 2 in a row. I'm not a believer in terms of them getting to the finals, but I do think, maybe the future is a little bit brighter for Atlanta than I thought it was coming into the postseason. Yeah.
And I think tonight is really going to be the encapsulation of it all, where Trae Young would have to play, I think, considerable minutes and also be as much as we've seen Trae Young, minus, of course, coming back from this injury, in order to give Atlanta a true shot. I don't think that just being at home makes it easier for Atlanta to come in and win this game. We've seen Milwaukee with the 1As, if it's Middleton, Holiday, Middleton, be able to pick up slack at times. I think it was just the shock of losing Giannis in a game which they were already down. But I don't have any problem saying, even if Trae Young plays tonight, Adam, I like Milwaukee. I like Milwaukee in a closeout spot, even though it's on the road.
Yeah, I'm with you. Kind of surprised Atlanta's favored, just because, Middleton and Holiday are still so good. You don't know if Young's going to play. And kind of like we were talking before the show, the thing that kind of concerns me too is we know that we got the report 2 games ago that, Trae Young tried really, really hard to play, but he was in too much pain. His, I think they said his lateral movement was too limited. So it seems to me like, and again, could be wrong, but it seems to me like if he is able to play today, like if they say like, look, if he says, like, I'm going to play, this is game 6, like we're down 3-2, I'm going to play, there's a pretty good chance that he's just not his normal self as well. So kind of surprised that they're favored.
Yeah, and I think that is biting on how Milwaukee looked initially with that when losing Giannis, and then the bounce back game where there's enough. And look, it's not a big line by any means. 3, that's down to 2.5. Odd Shopper, the place to go, and you can get everything up to date, shopped around wherever it may be to get the best value. And just looking at the spread from 3, 2.5. I mean, it's down for Atlanta to 1.5 on one book. So clearly it's been bet down, to your point, where it's like, wait a second, Milwaukee getting 3 on the road just because they don't have Giannis. And even with the cloud of Trae Young, it didn't make sense. Like that, the gate didn't make sense. And I think people have been betting it accordingly. And it might even come down, look, 8:30 tip Eastern, right? Probably 8:40, 8:45 tip Eastern. So this thing could realistically get down to a half, if not a pick 'em.
Yeah, agreed. Like I wouldn't be surprised at all if that line keeps moving in that direction.
So I think looking at tonight, the biggest question that I have for you as far as overall approach for it is looking at Trae Young first and foremost, and then the expectation that Giannis is out. And let's deal with Trae Young in the hypothetical first that he is out. It bumps people up, right? Cash games, if you have Giannis and Trae, it's much easier to give a stock chalk lineup and say, all right, we're rolling with guys. But who bumps up now in like a cash lineup minus Giannis, minus Trae tonight? Who are you looking at guys that you can go to consistently that you think outside of Middleton and I think Holiday on Milwaukee on the easy side that you're identifying now as like chalk plays? Maybe it is Brook Lopez based on what he did last time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 guys on each team that are the biggest beneficiaries in terms of guys that you probably wouldn't be looking at if Giannis were in or if Trae Young were in, or at least, you wouldn't be nearly as interested, that become really, really good options. On the Milwaukee side, I think it's, Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton. Bobby Portis last game played 35.7 minutes. We saw him during the regular season average about 29 minutes per game in his starts without Giannis. So assuming he does start this game again, he's going to look like a very strong option. We know that Bobby Portis gives you a lot of fantasy points per minute when he plays, and Giannis being out gives him a lot more playing time. Like when Giannis is in, Portis typically is just the backup center to Brook Lopez. When Giannis is out, you're getting all those minutes alongside Lopez. So Portis will look really good. Pat Connaughton only played about 21 minutes last game, but he's only 2,600 on DraftKings. He's someone where if Portis were to not play 36 minutes again tonight, like if Portis for one reason or another only plays, let's say 27, 28 minutes, those minutes are most likely going to Pat Connaughton, and you could see him, push 30 minutes or even exceed 30 minutes, depending on how he's playing, how the game goes, and he's still really cheap. So those are the 2 guys that I think benefit the most, again, in terms of players that you wouldn't really be interested in if Giannis were in. On the Atlanta side, Bogdan Bogdanovic and Lou Williams. Lou Williams, of course, just not playable if Trae Young plays, really, because typically he's just backing up Trae Young, playing 10, 11 minutes, and now his salary is up to 5,200 on DraftKings. But if Young is out, you got about 36 minutes from Williams last game. In the previous game, had it been competitive to the end, it looked like he was going to play about 36 minutes as well. We know he's a capable scorer. We've seen it for decades now, really, and he's still relatively inexpensive for 36 minutes. So he looks great if Young is out, essentially unplayable if Young is in. And then Bogdanovic, of course, even if Young is in, he's viable because he's still going to play big minutes. He's still going to start and all of that. But he takes on a bigger role when Young is out, gets more usage, gets more assist opportunities, they run the offense through him a bit more. So his ceiling just really skyrockets if Trae Young sits.
Yeah, and just to follow up on Bogdanovic and see more people popping in here as you continue to come in, remind you, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I know it's early. It's a 10 a.m. early show. But look, if Adam's getting up and sacrificing a 7-Eleven slushie for this program, then at the very least, you could return a like and make sure you're subscribed, even the notification bell, so you're here early. And, yeah, contrary to Street Preacher and others on the chat, man, I had to catch your back. I think you look relatively good compared to previous 10 a.m. shows, maybe one or two that we've had. And, look, I'm not ripping because I look like shit as well.
Yeah, I look like shit. I have YouTube open, and I'm just looking at myself like, man, you've got to get your life together.
What, from today?
Yeah.
Well, look, if it'll make you feel better, I think there was one like 3 or 4 shows ago where you were really banged up.
Oh yeah, that one was rough.
Yeah.
Like back in the day, it was a thing because I would do shows with EMAC at like 9 or 10 a.m. on Saturday mornings, and I would go out every single Friday night and just not like pretend I didn't have to work in the morning. And then I do the show with EMAC, and EMAC would like take it upon himself to make the worst jokes I've ever heard and try and get a reaction out of me. And it was a thing. I haven't done it as much, over the last year or so, but I guess we're getting back to that.
Yeah, look, you're young. You look expendable income. You're living in a nice city. Go out, live your life, man. Yeah. It's not like you're missing shows. It's not like, it's like, wait.
Yeah, I've only done that once. Got the call from Tom at like 30 minutes after my show started. Like, where are you? Be like, sleeping.
Man. Yeah, but again, you didn't have to drive anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of it. You didn't have to risk the DUI of driving because you still had all that booze in you. That's the worst. Having to drive to a radio station, it's like, oh man, look, I'm sorry, but I can't make it. It's like, no, you don't understand. I legally cannot get into a car right now. Yes, it's 8 a.m., but I cannot get into a car right now. Trust me.
Right. I stopped at 5 a.m. So
yes, exactly right. We've been there. I did want to follow up on something you mentioned about Bogdanovic, and I did see the prop there, an odd shopper. You can pound this thing over 17.5 points. And it's to your point specifically, Adam, about his usage and about his ability to score regardless if Trae Young is on the floor or not. And I feel like there's a good path to take advantage of Bogey tonight, because if Trae Young doesn't play, then that's an added bonus. But I do feel like with Trae Young's absence, Bogdanovic, as you mentioned, that bigger role, I don't think it just goes away. I think the team is still going to try and work him in, even with Trae Young, what we've seen. So it's almost like a bonus to me if Trae Young is out, and it's more on Bogdanovic. But I do feel like that's been a successful route, his knee injury aside, which seems to be healthy. That's been a successful path, almost like a trustable path that I think I can get to tonight with Bogdanovic, regardless of what's happening with Trae.
Yeah, the salary is a little bit scary at 8,800 if Young plays, because there is, I already mentioned that I think there's a decent chance if Young plays, he's limited in terms of what he can do. But there's obviously some chance that he's just good to go today, and he goes back to being the guy that, really just runs the offense, dominates the touches, and Bogdanovic goes back to being like a 20% usage guy. But I still have interest if Young plays, just because I think Bogdanovic is a really good player. And I think when you look at it in terms of like, what can Atlanta do? What does Atlanta need to win this game? You need Bogdanovic to step up and have a big game, whether Trae Young plays or not. So I still think there's upside for him. I just feel a little bit less confident rostering him at that salary if Young plays, because in the 2 games without Young, he had a 30% usage rate, a 24.5% usage rate, 19 shots and 22 shots. So you might it's a lot riskier if Young plays, but I think that the potential is still there.
Make sure you're using everything. The ownership projections are free today. MLB slate ownership also free, but for the purposes of what we're doing now, the NBA Showdown single game ownership projections are free. To Awesemo Plus people out there, then you should be using the Boom Bust tool, lineup crunchers as well. But it's $29.95 a week to get on here. And we recommend that you do it across the board because as basketball wanes off, you're going to have a bunch of other sports to take advantage of. If you're not already doing it right now and bouncing between rooms and shows thinking, hey, I just saw Adam last night tell me how to make some money on the diamond. And now we're right back on the NBA side. So that's all free for you today. But if you don't want to wait once a week, we'll just jump on $29.95 and you want to bump it up to Awesemo Plus Platinum NBA Strategy Show, all caps, one word. That's the promo, 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus. It's easy. It's simple. Platinum, pardon me. And you can bump up even higher and take advantage of even more. But as you know, each stage you get, you continue to get more opportunity to take advantage of everything that Alex and the site provides for you. So captains now, and we deal with injury, and I think we can kind of go at this two ways, right? Let's start with the assumption, Adam, that Trae Young is out. Let's just say, all right, it comes down to game time decision. Atlanta has ruled Trae Young out. We already know that Giannis is out. So I imagine from an ownership standpoint, people are going to be rushing to Middleton, Holiday, Middleton as a captain. So from a cash game standpoint, as well as a tournament standpoint, how do you address the captain and also the MVP with FanDuel? We can talk about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, excuse me, Holiday and Middleton, the two just obvious answers here, because with Atlanta, even if Young sits, we know Bogdanovic benefits. John Collins' ceiling gets a little bit higher, but there's no one guy that you can expect to just, dominate the game like you get with Milwaukee with Holiday and Middleton. So you are getting a ton of ownership going there, about 25 to 26% for each as captains on DraftKings. FanDuel, even higher, 37% for Middleton, 28% for Holiday. Again, on FanDuel, the prices don't change. So it's even harder to get away from those guys in the MVP spot. If you are looking to get away from them, who, just obvious, very, very strong plays, both guys benefit in terms of usage, assist percentage, per minute production without Giannis. Then you get, Bobby Portis, who again played 36 minutes last game. That's a spot where you could pay down a little bit. The thing that makes it really difficult with these two teams is, and you saw it, anyone that played last slate saw it as well, a lot of times it's tempting when someone like Giannis or someone like Trae Young is out to pay down. But the thing is, there's not, or to pay down a captain, so you can open up more money at utility. The problem with the way these two teams are currently constructed is we're assuming, Giannis isn't playing. Trae Young may or may not be playing. If he does, he's very risky. If he doesn't, obviously you're not rostering him. You kind of run out of guys to pay up for if you go the Bobby Portis or Lou Williams or whoever, mid-range guy at captain. You're going to get Middleton, you're going to get Holiday, which is great. But then it's just kind of like you end up plugging in, filling in your lineup with, like, last slate, for example, Kevin Huerter was $8,400. Today he's $7,800. Still not a guy that is going to look great at that salary, but it's like, oh, I guess I'll just get to more of the Kevin Huerter type guys because I have the savings. So it's a really weird, really tough, I think, spot with just the way these two teams are constructed, because you can't get, I mean, you can, but it's tough to get that creative without just completely sacrificing the upside of your lineup, I think.
Okay, but real quick, I wonder from a different, not even opposite angle of it, Adam, I wonder from a different path to taking advantage of where people don't like leaving salary on the board. It's like, I don't want to leave 3,400 on the board, so let me race to roster Kevin Huerter as my last guy, just so my roster looks better with $400 left over.
Yeah, that's the
right.
That's the way that I think you can actually take advantage of the way this is. Whether you're going with Holiday or Middleton at captain and then just still leaving money, or if you are going down to Portis, for example, that's a spot that definitely came up last slate. Like, for example, in cash games, I ended up playing John Collins, who did well. He beat Clint Capela, but there was a strong argument, and consideration to just saying, like, okay, I'll play Capela over Collins, even though he was like $2,000 less expensive, because there's a decent chance, Capela beats Collins. When, using the Kevin Huerter example, Lou Williams is, $2,600 less expensive. There's a pretty good chance Lou Williams scores more fantasy points than Kevin Huerter if Trae Young is out. So that's the situation where, like, normally, especially in NBA, because players are more projectable, their performances are more predictable. Normally, I'm not a big proponent of leaving money on the table. This is one exception, because I think with it being a single game slate, there's a lot of guys that are priced up that just don't really deserve those prices and have a very similar range of outcomes to players that are also cheaper.
Yeah, and I think from the captain's standpoint, if we start talking about guys that we are paying down for, we mentioned you also talking about Bobby Portis and looking at guys from the top. I am interested. Do you think you'll get to much Pat Connaughton as a captain if you are paying down for guys?
No, I wouldn't anticipate that. Like, to me, that just seems like you're leaving a lot of upside on the table. You can certainly do it in those larger field tournaments where, you know, it's kind of like on a one game slate. The more risk you take, the more, the less you're going to be duped, the more your potential upside is, I guess, in terms of actual dollars. But with Connaughton, it's tough because, for one, you only saw him play 21 to 22 minutes last game, even though Giannis was out. You saw Bobby Portis really dominate those minutes. And then, two, even if you were to get 30 minutes from Connaughton, which I think is possible, again, it would involve Portis probably playing poorly and Connaughton getting more of those minutes. Connaughton's still not the highest, fantasy producer. So, and it doesn't open up that much for you in terms of what you're getting in your lineup. So, going to Connaughton at captain, I think, is going to be pretty tough to justify when you think about it in terms of ceiling. Like, you're probably giving up 80 points or something, or
Right.
70, 80 points to guys like Middleton and Holiday potentially. So, you'll have to make that up elsewhere in your lineup. And if Giannis is out, if Young is out, it's just very difficult to do because, who is getting those points for you if those guys aren't playing?
Yeah, so there really aren't many options as far as low-cost guys. I know Bobby Portis, but Bobby Portis has been bumped up on DraftKings, and he's over 6K now. Gallinari, I guess you can make an argument, has dropped significantly with his money at 3,800. I don't know if that would be worth and I guess you can now classify him as a low-cost punt there. But everybody else that I guess you would make an argument outside of Middleton Young would be in that range. Middleton Holiday would be in that range of in the middle. And one thing I see that I was a little surprised at, look, I don't think that it's fair to expect Brook Lopez to dominate and break this slate again 2 games in a row. But even on our boom bust tool, he's significantly lower than I thought he would be to boom. I mean, he's lower than Okongwu right now to boom. So I would think that there's more of a middle ground and maybe a pathway to rostering Lopez as your captain tonight, not as your MVP. I don't think he's the leading scorer in FanDuel, but I could see a small path at least. I thought at least I could see a small path for Lopez at the captain. And then I see the boom bust tool and I'm thinking, well, let me check with Adam on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's one of the guys, if you're getting away from Middleton Holiday, I think Lopez is reasonable because he should play a lot of minutes. You only have to go back one game to see him play really well and see the ceiling that he has. It's not likely that he, duplicates that. He shot 14 for 18 from the field. On one hand, it's very nice that he took 18 shots. He had a 25.5% usage rate. He's very unlikely to make, 14 if he, even takes 18 shots again. He's not someone that typically sees a huge bump when Giannis is out. So that's something else that concerns me. But he is at least, in line to get huge minutes. He does actually kind of benefit from Bobby Portis being the starter alongside him. That was one thing that I paid attention to last game because with Portis normally being the backup center, if he's starting alongside Lopez, you can kind of expect Lopez is going to play more minutes. You saw him play almost 38 minutes last game. Whereas, if Pat Connaughton had joined the starting lineup instead of Portis, there would have been a pretty good chance that Portis is still just getting those backup center minutes behind Lopez as his, most of his minutes. And it kind of limits how many minutes Lopez is going to play. So assuming Portis does start alongside Lopez again, I think you can expect 36 plus minutes from him, which is nice. And he's certainly someone you can use in the captain spot. But I also just don't expect a repeat performance from last game.
Now, I was just going to come out and ask you about Clint Capela, but I think I would just rather read you 720 Red Dogs statement and saying Pat C at captain is like, no, that's Connaughton. Pardon me. I thought he was saying Capela. I'm conflated 2 different ones. There is a lot of hate, though, on the stream for Capela, fading Capela, not running Capela at all in many captain scenarios. Are you looking at him as a possible captain, or should we just continue to kind of pound the theme of the stream and fade him in that spot?
It's really, really difficult to break down Clint Capela, I think, because he hasn't been good in the postseason at all from a fantasy standpoint. This is someone that during the regular season was averaging 1.3 fantasy points per minute. In the postseason, he's less than 1 fantasy point per minute. The minutes haven't really been consistent. I thought maybe he would benefit actually in terms of playing time from Giannis being out, because you had seen in one of the competitive games in this series, Both teams closed small. Lopez, Portis, Capela all on the bench for most of the fourth quarter. But it's much less likely that Milwaukee does that when you don't have Giannis because you're already a man short. You're probably not taking Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis off the floor as well. So my thinking last game was that maybe that solidifies Capela's minutes. Maybe you get him playing 30 plus. He still just didn't play a lot of minutes. And there was really no reason for him to when you consider that Brook Lopez shot 14 for 18 from the field. Like, what was Clint Capela doing out there? What was the point of him being on the floor? So it's really, really difficult to trust him. On the other hand, it's a single game slate. We know the type of production Clint Capela can give you, even though we haven't seen it this postseason. At his price tag, I'm still tempted to go there just because I think the ceiling's very high, but man, the floor is low. Just based on how he's played this postseason, based on the minutes he's playing in the series, there's a lot of risk. But I still think there's at least some upside just based on what we know Clint Capela is capable of doing. And also, it's not like, Clint Capela is someone in the past has really benefited from pick and roll, whether it be with James Harden this year with Trae Young. Lou Williams has, can do that as well. Like, you go back to the Clippers days, the Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell pairing off the bench. Harrell was just so much better when he played with Williams. So, like, there's still a path to success for Capela here. It's just he's been terrible. So you know how low the floor is.
All right, so two quick ones to follow up on that with Capela. One, how much does it truly matter if Trae Young plays, factoring in on you rostering Capela from a captain spot to just as utility player? And then also, point blank, if you have the money, which we all do tonight because of this slate and with the expectations that at least Giannis and possibly most likely Trae Young being out, Collins or Capela at the captain spot?
I prefer Collins. He played 34 minutes last game. He's someone that his playing time in this series has been down, but it's been a lot of fluky stuff too. A couple of blowouts, a game where he was in foul trouble and lost playing time. If he's not in foul trouble and this game is remotely competitive, I fully expect you're getting 34 plus from John Collins. He's someone that during the regular season, his per minute production didn't benefit that much without Trae Young on the floor, but his usage rate did increase. So at the very least, you're getting a higher ceiling from him. And at least the same production, if not a little bit more. So I think John Collins is still my preferred option to Capela. Obviously, he's a bit more expensive as well, but I do lean towards him because I don't think you have. If this game's competitive, I would be very, very surprised if Atlanta's just like, we're playing John Collins 26 minutes. If this game's competitive and Atlanta plays Clint Capela 26 minutes and they give more minutes to guys like Gallinari, Cam Reddish, just play smaller lineups with Collins at the 5, that wouldn't be surprising at all. So I think that the edge definitely goes to John Collins between the two.
There's one thing that I wanted to flip and start just looking at, especially from the top with Trae Young playing tonight, because I do feel like, and you've referenced it both pre-show and then at the start of the show, that just getting Trae Young active and just getting Trae Young on the floor doesn't equal, okay, Trae Young is back. And I think that we need to factor all of that in, looking at how people would roster Young. So I think from a FanDuel standpoint, are you in? Trae Young's active. All right. We know that the Hawks say Young's going to play tonight. Are you moving to roster him at all at the MVP spot, knowing that it's probably going to be a pivot from Middleton, Holiday, Middleton?
I mean, the problem right now with the way that we have ownership projected is that we have almost 24% going to Trae Young. We have 28% going to Holiday, and then we have 37 going to Middleton. In that, like, if that ownership projection holds, I would rather just go to still more Middleton, more Holiday, because I think there is a decent chance that Trae Young isn't at full strength. Maybe he doesn't play 38, 40 minutes. Maybe he's not able to, be as efficient offensively. Like, could he be great? Sure. But if a quarter of the field is going to roster him at MVP, there's not a whole lot of benefit to taking that risk, I don't think. Whereas you could just go to more Middleton, Holiday. And in my mind, this is kind of comparable to like the Sonny Gray thing yesterday. Yep. When we did the show in the morning, we had Sonny Gray projected for 25% ownership. And it was kind of just like, okay, I don't really want to roster him at that ownership because there's so many red flags. But then by the time you got to lock on the baseball slate, he was down to like 7%. And it was just like, okay, well, now I'm interested because there's also massive upside. That's how I feel about Trae Young here too. If at lock, he's projected for 25% MVP ownership, I think the risk is kind of higher than the reward because there's so much uncertainty. But if by then you're getting a bunch more ownership going to Holiday and Middleton at MVP, Trae Young's down to, let's say, 10%, then it's really interesting because we don't know how he feels. We don't know how he's going to play if he does play. I think it's very likely that he's limited or not at 100%, but I have no idea. So if he's 10% owned or something like that, then it starts to become really intriguing to go there. But to me, if his ownership is in the same ballpark as someone like Holiday, I would rather just be jamming Drew Holiday.
Oh, it's funny you mentioned 10% because he's 10.9% owned as we see it projected as a captain spot on DraftKings. So how workable now is that where you don't need him to be the highest scoring player in the game in order to benefit from him being in the captain spot on DK? And all of a sudden that number, I would think based on what you said earlier at 20% on FanDuel being too hot to touch, 10.9 at least on the surface seems workable, Adam.
Yeah, it's reasonable. It's definitely a spot where, if I'm playing a bunch of lineups in tournaments, I would be getting to Trae Young at that ownership. The kind of problem, I guess, is like the ownership on Holiday is a little bit lower on DraftKings than it is FanDuel. Middleton specifically, though, goes from 38% MVP on FanDuel to only a 25% captain on DraftKings. So you're getting a little bit less ownership going to those guys, but you're still getting 2.5 to 1 basically on Trae Young. And again, it's just there's a lot of uncertainty. I'm not going to pretend like I know how Trae Young feels or how he's going to perform. It's to me, I think the most difficult thing in NBA to project is very, very good players like Trae Young coming back from an injury, and you're basically just guessing, how they feel and how they're going to perform. You saw with James Harden with Brooklyn, where he played 44 minutes, but he was just a complete decoy. You could certainly see the same thing from Trae Young, but you could also just see where he's had several days off and he's good to go now. So there's a very, very wide range of outcomes. And just in general, when you have players like that, they become a lot more appealing as the ownership goes down.
See it right there, the ownership projections. You can take full advantage of that. Awesemo Plus. Look, we don't ask much, right? Just hit that like button. We see a bunch of people continue to pile in here as we get deeper into the strategy show. So if you've been here from the jump already waiting like 10, 15 minutes before, that's it. Remind the community, hey, you're in here, you're leaving a nice little quip. You're making fun of Shander. You're referencing Adams hungover, whatever it may be. Also, leave a like. Make sure you're subscribed as well. That's huge for us here. And we're brought to you today by No House Advantage. And I was looking at NHA in comparison to what you were just saying right now about Trae Young and seeing where we can kind of take advantage of that, because the beauty of No House Advantage is whatever you have right now is going to be locked in. You jump in, that line based off of our own projections at NHA is not going to budge, even if you get news about an injured player like Trae Young, for example, playing. So we have a pretty high predictability here for two guys that we talked a lot about outside of Trae Young on both ends, in Portis and Bogdanovic, rebounds-wise at least, taking advantage of maybe some extra minutes for Bogey being out there, and Portis, what we saw. But there's some pretty heavy interest on Trae Young as well, if in fact he's playing, from both assists and rebounds. And I was thinking, all right, if in fact, to your point, Trae Young is a decoy or not being used primarily as the number one slasher scorer and trying to set up more maybe knockdown shots for him, he could, because he's going to have the ball in his hands. You could jump to this path, Adam, that he's more of the facilitator even than usual. So the line that we have at NHA, and again, this is the beauty of going to No House Advantage. We'll give you the promo code in a second to use, but the line there is 8.5. He's projected for 10 assists. And I feel like that speaks to the narrative that we've that you personally, created there, where it's like, look, there's a very good possibility that Young could be out there, but not drop 35 points and still be effective on the floor. And I think you could take advantage of that right there at No House Advantage as well.
Yeah, agreed. Because if Young's full strength, 8.5 assists is obviously a very good line. But to what you were just saying, if he's not, there's a good chance that you see those assists tick up. And, again, just kind of using James Harden as the example, the Bucks were using Drew Holiday and to some extent Chris Middleton on Harden, but when they stopped, when they actually briefly would double team Kevin Durant, you saw Harden just he can still run the offense. He still can play point guard, and it's the same thing with Trae Young, where even if he's not scoring, they're gonna have to allocate some amount of defense to him. Otherwise, he's gonna just carve them up in terms of assists. So I do like that line if Trae Young plays.
Yeah, and you can see right there, Portis, Bogey, Trae Young, all overs that we have, and rebounds. Bogdanovic, you'd think 3.5 rebounds. That's pretty short of a number right there for him to get, especially if Young's out. He's going to be just active and long shots there. So take full advantage of No House Advantage. Over 500 player prop offerings from everything: basketball, baseball, Hockey is, or pardon me, NFL coming around the corner. Golf, as it's going on, I was going to say right now, just use our promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. You know the site, the name, everything going on here, the promo code, and you'll receive a $20 first match deposit. You can make some good coin off of that immediately, especially if you're just paying attention to what we're doing here on the Strategy Show. So looking at guys kind of below the MVP spot, the captain spot, and kind of in accordance to where we are from an ownership standpoint as well, I'm looking at Hawks outside of the obvious that we kind of talked about here. And I feel like there's a general consensus that if it's cost or if it's just not believing that he can live up to that cost, there's going to be more of a fade of Kevin Huerter. Is that a fair statement than not for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just he's going to play minutes, but you're still talking about Kevin Huerter.
Yep.
He's typically just not going to produce that many fantasy points. You're going to see a lot more, at least I think, of the playmaking and usage in particular going to Bogdanovic. You know, last game he did get 7 assists from Huerter. He actually had 7 assists in 3 straight games. So both of the games that Young was out, that's really good to see. But the usage rate, you know, still hasn't had above a 20% usage rate in this series, 19.7 and 15.7% usage rate in the games without Young. So like he's fine if Young is out because he does benefit, especially in terms of playmaking. But and we know he's going to play a lot of minutes, but it's still just, you know, really tough to, I think, trust Kevin Huerter at that salary.
So I think that opens up where if it's not the Collins Capela that we kind of went through, where else can you get a path to some value? And it seems like Gallinari is the most obvious choice because of minutes, because of 3,800 on DK, the cost. I imagine, though, that everybody else is going to be on him. So from an ownership standpoint, I'm not looking at it so much as, and just looking at it too. I mean, he's at 36.4%, which actually seems low enough for me to say that that's still a value play, knowing that at 3,800, you can get a guy that can get you 15, 20 points if he's hitting his ceiling.
Yeah, I like the salary on Gallinari. I guess to lead with the negative, the one concern I have is he's just not playing a lot of minutes. He only played 23 minutes last game. That was a game where, you know, you only got 21 minutes from Clint Capela. And so like in games like that, you would really like to see Gallinari pushing 30 minutes when that game script comes out and they go small. So it is concerning because, I mean, like if he's not hitting shots or Capela's playing well and they play bigger, you could still get like a 20-minute game or an 18-minute game or something from Gallinari, which is really concerning. But on the other hand, especially if Trae Young is out, they need scoring somewhere. And Gallinari is one of the guys that can step up, knock down some threes, you know, should have like a 27, 28% usage rate somewhere in there. So at 3,800, I do think he's a good value. I think that it's very reasonable. You know, again, I'm just a little concerned about the playing time. The other cheap guy that I would look to from Atlanta, again, especially if Young is out, is Cam Reddish, who is, you know, in the rotation now. They've said he's on a minutes restriction, but we got a really interesting or weird, I guess, quote from Nate McMillan yesterday that essentially he said Cam Reddish is on a minutes restriction, but the reason he's only been playing 22 to 23 minutes is because of his conditioning, not his minutes restriction. So to me, that's interesting because I still think, and this is assuming Young is out, I still think the most likely outcome is that Cam Reddish plays something like 22 or 23 minutes. But that quote to me makes Reddish's ceiling a little bit higher because it's implying that his minutes restriction is not 24 minutes. It's implying that if he is able to keep running up and down the floor, he can play more than these 23 or 24 minutes. So it gives you some chance of this just being a game where Cam Reddish is like, look, I'm good, leave me out there. And you get 27, 28 minutes, something like that from Reddish. So that quote, I think, was somewhat interesting from a DFS standpoint, just because it at least told us that they're not intentionally capping him at this, 23-minute mark.
So 3,400, Norristown's finest, by the way, Cam Reddish. Nice shout there down the street. Looking at that as a possible low-cost, not even punt, if you look at the scenario that you just laid out. In tournaments, can you get to Reddish as your captain much?
It's just so hard with these two teams because, what are you – it just comes back to the same thing, we've talked about with essentially punting captain. Where are you benefiting? Like, for example, in the Brooklyn-Milwaukee series, you could punt captain, and it's like, oh, cool, now I can get Durant plus Harden. Let's pretend Harden was healthy. Durant plus Harden plus Giannis, and the only way to do that is to punt captain. Here, it's just you're punting captain, but you're going to still be playing essentially the same guys that you would be playing if you played Holiday or Middleton to captain. So it's really, really tough because it's like, where are you benefiting? Like, what's the point outside of just saying, I hope I get really, really lucky. Gallinari somehow scores 50 fantasy points and I win a tournament, because people didn't play him, at captain. So like, you can still do it in those large field top heavy tournaments, but I just the layout of these two teams, I think, makes it really unappealing. You're basically just even more so than usual saying like, I really hope I get lucky here.
Yeah, and I think that would be the element of it, right? Is that there's got to be some luck in it to where Reddish hits his ceiling, and this is the game where he transforms from being out of shape to in shape, and through flow or narrative or foul trouble, whatever it may be, we see these scenarios come out. Like it's a very small percentage of it happening. That's why I led with tournaments and not even referencing it as far as like, could you work them in as a utility in a chalk lineup? By no means. I am curious though, and this kind of goes back to lower cost options at the bottom where Trae Young is playing. And I think now there's a third narrative, right? It's like, okay, Trae Young's either out or he's in. Well, what happens if he's in? Then there's a split from it, like another little tree. Well, he dominates and he's back, and it's like he was never hurt, which I don't necessarily want to believe. Or like you've mentioned and we've talked about, there's middle ground where he's clearly limited, but he's out there and he's impactful and other people around him. That's still going to take minutes away from Lou Williams. I don't see a scenario, right, where the two of them are going to be on the floor and there's going to be complementary action. So I wonder if you get word immediately that Trae Young is out. Are you looking to fade Lou Williams, or are you just looking to get to him very little throughout?
I really like Lou Williams if Young is out.
Oh, I'm sorry. If Young is in, I apologize.
Oh, yeah. If Young is in, don't touch Lou Williams.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. Like his role typically has just been mostly backing up Trae Young. Maybe he plays a couple minutes alongside him. Obviously, we don't know exactly what Atlanta's rotation will look like if Young is back, but also like the presence of Cam Reddish, it just makes it really, really unlikely that you're getting any sort of, it's very, very unlikely that you're getting like 24 minutes from Lou Williams or something like that if Trae Young plays. It's the most likely, I think, by far scenario is that Williams just goes back to being the backup point guard, maybe plays a couple minutes alongside Young, but you're not talking about Lou Williams being 1 or 2K anymore. He's 5,200, which it's a kind of dumb price point, like for lack of a better word, because if Trae Young is out, he's unplayable. And if Trae Young is in, he's unplayable. And if Trae Young is out, he's a ridiculously good value. So it's almost like I think the site should have just priced him as if Young is just out, and so at least you have like some sort of like decision point if Young sits.
Yeah, what do you think he should be accurately at? Where the value is?
75.
Because Young out, he becomes an immediate impact player. Yeah, so that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. That's a lot of value left.
It's like a backup quarterback in NFL. Like, just price them as if the starter's going to sit, because literally 0 people are playing him if the starter plays. And if you price him like if you take that middle ground and you say, oh, he's going to be really, really cheap, the only time people are playing him is when the starter's out, and it just makes him drastically underpriced. That's kind of like what we're getting with Lou Williams here.
So some lower cost guys that are not active, and I don't imagine that maybe in a tournament you would do one roster or so, but just looking at it from just working guys in your lineup, especially with the 1 game slate and the expectation that you're most likely going to be leaving some salary on the board. We can go, I guess, with the understanding that we're going to roster a Middleton, Holiday, somebody at the top, maybe not looking at it like paying down clearly for a Connaughton, for example, but low cost guys that you think we can get to. And I do see a lot of love on our ownership projection here for Bryn Forbes. And also on the flip side, that everybody's in love with Okongwu. So these are cheap options that you can get to on both sides of the game here, Adam. I just don't know how much you're rushing to get to either.
Okongwu and
Bryn Forbes.
Oh yeah. Rushing is definitely not the word I would use. Yeah. I mean, they're kind of just like lineup filler, I think, in those larger field tournaments. Okongwu played 16 minutes last game. He had played, I think, 13 or 14 the game before. He's certainly someone that produces at a pretty high rate when he's out there. So like he's another guy that if this were different, like if Giannis were in, and 100%, if we knew Trae Young was 100%, Okongwu, based on his recent playing time, would actually be an interesting value because he'd be one of the guys you can use to kind of open the door to getting all four of, Holiday, Middleton, Giannis, Young in your lineup. The problem here, though, is like with those guys out, if Giannis out and then Young, let's assume he's out, where are you benefiting by using a roster spot on someone that's likely to play 13, 14 minutes in Okongwu? Like, you're using that roster spot to what? Go from Clint Capela to Kevin Herter? Congratulations, but I don't really know that you gained anything there. So it's just really, it's really weird with both of these teams being banged up. Normally on these showdown slates, it's really interesting to talk about because you get to guys like Okongwu and you're saying, oh, well, if he can just play those 14 minutes, it opens up so much for me. But with these two teams in their current state, it's just like it doesn't really open up anything because there's nothing to pay for.
Yeah, and I think that's where it becomes just interesting that it jumps out where Forbes, for example, and I use Okongwu just because he's a little bit below, but the percentages dip significantly to where it's mostly like a big slate in baseball where you have that meat of like 1% difference of expected value or ownership or even top stack. But in this case, for the boom percentage, I was a little surprised how high Forbes is, where it's pretty much outside of Connaughton. Now, look, Portis expected for what he's done last game in the opening without Giannis, but Bryn Forbes is pretty high. I mean, we have him just under 15% to boom. And then when you look at ownership, he's, as expected, he's only at right around 15%. So I just, at 1,600, I know, like, okay, you're going to leave so much back there and you're not really gaining an advantage for leaving money on the board. But if you're okay as that guy, as your back end last slot, and you understand that you may be leaving 2,500, 3K on the board for that, is there any maneuverability to take advantage of just the metrics that we have of how high he's predicted to boom and how low owned he would be on this slate?
Well, the thing to keep in mind with the boom percentage, and normally, again, it's just a weird combination of teams. Normally, you don't have to think about it too much because like you're just very easily going to spend close to the full salary. But with the boom percentage, it's based on his salary. So it's not, it's not saying that there's like a 15% chance that he scores enough fantasy points to like win a tournament. It's saying that there's a 15% chance he scores, like 5x plus 10, I think is the bar. But he's only 1,600. So yeah, if he scores 5x plus 10, that's great, but it's not enough raw points that you're like, oh, you needed Bryn Forbes in your lineup unless you benefited somewhere else with the savings. And on this slate, like, where are you benefiting with the savings? So to me, it's the case for Bryn Forbes is there are times, like if you play this game 1,000 times, there are times that Milwaukee's rotation will go smaller. You'll get maybe Bobby Portis just plays 24, 25 minutes for one reason or another. Brook Lopez plays 30 minutes for one reason or another. Pat Connaughton plays a bunch more minutes. And then Forbes also plays more minutes. Like, it's certainly not the most likely outcome, but again, if you played this game 1,000 times, you probably get some times where like you could just get some weird ass Milwaukee lineup with like PJ Tucker at the 5.
Yep.
It's, it probably happens more than 0 times. So that's kind of the case is like, maybe you say, okay, if Forbes, then not Portis, if Forbes, then not Lopez, probably not Connaughton either, because that's another path to Forbes. Like if Forbes comes out and just like knocks down 4 straight threes, maybe he takes some of those Pat Connaughton minutes instead. So like with Forbes, there's a path to him having success. It normally, I think, hinges on him just like coming out on fire and then staying on fire. So like he's still someone that you probably, if you're playing like 150 lineups, you want exposure to Bryn Forbes, but he definitely still just falls in that category where he would be a lot more appealing value option if there was stuff for me to pay for because I roster Bryn Forbes.
So you just mentioned the one name that we didn't get to throughout the slate, and that's PJ Tucker. And I don't know what to classify him tonight as, a punt, as a decent value, as a mid-range guy. I mean, how do you even approach Tucker tonight on both sites? Maybe there is some value on FanDuel for him versus DraftKings. How do you just look at rostering PJ Tucker?
I try and avoid that at all costs, really. I mean, He's going to play 38 to 40 minutes. That's the plus. He's going to probably have a 10% or lower usage rate. That's the negative. You're just hoping he's efficient, knocks down his corner threes, some rebounds bounce to him. He's reasonably priced for someone playing 40 minutes. The way I view it is just kind of like if I build a lineup and I have $4,400 or $4,500 or whatever left over, getting 40 minutes from PJ Tucker and taking my chances is fine. I will also probably try and rework that lineup several times to make sure I'm not missing out on getting upside somewhere else. But as a last guy in, 40 minutes or 38 minutes is fine, but it's PJ Tucker. I mean, you're happy if he scores 20 fantasy points, even in 40 minutes.
Fair enough, brother. And one thing, just to go back, is we mentioned we had a couple of props. Odd Shopper is the place where we go. Everything is already done. The work is already done for you. You can look across multiple books and get the best value. And it's not just player props. I mean, looking at the spread here, as we told you, it's back up to 2 now. So it dipped for Atlanta, at least. It dipped down to 1.5 as we started the show. Odd Shopper had one book that had it down to 1.5. Now, across the board consensus as a 2-point line. And again, we talked about this at the jump, man. Even if Trae Young is playing tonight, to get 2 points on the road for Milwaukee in a closeout scenario where all they're missing is Giannis, okay. And I don't mean to downplay all they're missing is Giannis, but okay. I'm okay with taking the 2 there, and you can get some really good value on that. As far as individual, and this is one of those props where I think it's contrary to where we talk about activating Kevin Huerter in a DFS lineup to taking advantage of maybe a prop line that is a little low, where Kevin Huerter can get you 14 points tonight and still be a great fade in DFS because he didn't do shit. But he could definitely get you over 12.5 points tonight. So do you like that over 12.5? Because that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I think I can get 14 points from him tonight and still feel really good about listening to you and fading him in my DFS lineups.
Yeah, especially if Young is out. Like if Young is out, I think Huerter projects for like 15, 16 actual points. So that would look like a really good prop. And that is a spot where, it kind of comes back to, if you can, just play multiple sites, if you have the time and you live in a state where you can, play multiple sites, play multiple formats. It just kind of, even though you're going to end up with more money in play, you're going to end up just like naturally hedged without even trying to. So like that's one spot that you can just naturally do it. You're not saying you're not putting down bad money somewhere, just like hope, in case Kevin Huerter does well. You're just getting your money in the best spot. Like this is where I think I can make money on Kevin Huerter. In DFS, I don't think I can. So you just end up like naturally hedged, and you can make more money that way for sure.
And I think the same thing with Bogey, where Bogdanovic sits at 17.5 for his point total on Odd Shopper, and we have a really good return on that. Even the ROI is actually the highest that you can get sorted on Odd Shopper for Bogey. And I think that, again, the pathway for him to scoring 18, 20 points in order for that prop to hit is still active with Trae Young. Whereas, okay, Trae Young's playing, you made a good argument as far as it doesn't necessarily mean that Bogdanovic always bumps up from a fantasy standpoint. Like areas could be taken away, even though he could still have a good night and might be in a good spot to roster. But I feel like Trae Young aside, that's a factor that doesn't really matter to me. I can still see multiple pathways for Bogdanovic to being involved in the offense, even with Young there, where he kind of has to be at 20, 22 tonight in order for the Hawks to win.
Yeah, I think he projects like 22, 23 points if Young is out. You would knock that a bit if Young is in. But still, the minute should still be there. He's still a very good player. Like Bogdanovic should be involved one way or the other here.
Last one that I was interested in and kind of get your thoughts on it. It's a rebounding prop for Middleton. And I think the expectation is, well, he's going to be out there a ton because they have to fill that void gone with Giannis. I don't know, though, if he becomes more than just a primary scorer. And I think we've seen that at times where guys who are put in that role of filling a void to get more offense. And again, Holiday's going to be there. But we also see, as we saw last game, Lopez, right? The shift of Lopez from being outside as a three-point shooter to being down low and being really physical and trying to own the key. And I think that may limit Middleton's rebound. So I saw this in Odd Shopper as a really good return on it, under 9.5 rebounds. Double-digit rebounds, I feel like, is a big ask for Middleton tonight. I could easily slide in on a sweat and him land 9 at him, but I felt like that seemed a little off based on what we saw the last game with Lopez and kind of Middleton taking on more of a primary scorer role.
Yeah, and even if you go back to like during the regular season, you have I think like 7, 8, 9, something like that games where Giannis was out and Middleton and Holiday played. Middleton's rebounding percentage goes from 9.4% in the games that Giannis played to 9.7% when he's out. So he doesn't get a big bump there. I think he projects for like 7.5 to 8 rebounds in this game. So completely agree on the under there.
Is there anybody on the way out here? I know we look at the optimal lineups, and I think things have shifted with Trae Young's status up in the air and Giannis kind of being out, as we know and anticipate. Is there a guy that we've looked at where you're going to roster and maybe mid to low end cost guy that you're pretty certain is going to be optimal tonight?
No.
Okay, so it's pretty much going to be heavy chalk.
Yeah, these two
chalk
teams
has moved up, right? I mean, the line of chalk has moved up, especially if Young is out.
Yeah. It's just these two teams, I think, make it very, very, very difficult to differentiate in a way that makes sense. You know, again, like going back to what I said earlier, you can differentiate, but when on a lot of them, you're going to look at your lineup and like you just have to understand, like you are hoping to get very lucky. These two teams, just with the way they're currently constructed, there's not a lot of spots that I look at where it's like, oh, everyone's going to play this guy at 10K. I think this guy has the same range of outcomes and is going to be way lower owned. It's just, it's very straightforward, I think, with these two teams. And, it is what it is. Like you can only take what you're given. I think it's just going to be slates like this in general. It's a little bit harder to, I don't want to say to profit, but to make money in terms of like your ROI. Like you're just kind of capped because unless something goes really crazy and you get lucky and Danilo Gallinari scores more fantasy points than Chris Middleton somehow, like there's only so many things you can do, and everyone is very aware of what they are.
Look, we appreciate you all out there. Leave us a like. Hit Adam up on Twitter when you do win that money after listening to the strategy show this morning at Ship My Money DFS, at Shander Show for me. Thank you to Chris, as always, for producing the show. Thanks to you out there. And, yeah, just leave us a like. We don't ask for much. Make sure you're subscribed as well. And I did see on the chat, both of us do look like we've been through hell and back. Different means to the same end. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks.